today's episode of The Faith Edge. I am your host and the founder, Minister Marisa, and I am so glad that you decided to join us today. Today's guest is Reverend Dr. Campbell B. Singleton III. He is our guest of today, and I'm just going to read you his brief snippet of his bio. Pastor Singleton is the Associate Executive Minister of American Baptist Churches of Metropolitan, New York. He is also the Senior Pastor of the historic Union Baptist Church of Montclair, New Jersey, and has held that position for the past 10 years. Prior to accepting the call from Union Baptist Church, Pastor Singleton served 17 years as an associate minister in the esteemed Trinity Baptist Church in the Bronx, New York. It is there that his pastoral ministry was greatly influenced, especially by its eclectic liturgical patterns of worship with its rich movements, symbols, pageantry, and full repertoire of musical expressions. Dr. Singleton was ordained to the gospel ministry in Trinity on October of 1998. And currently, he serves as he serves on the program staff of ABC Metropolitan New York as the Associate Executive Minister. He is responsible for mobilizing churches to fund ABC ministries through the missions program. His administrative skills, problem-solving skills, collaborative leadership skills, theological reflections, and understanding of program ministry design and implementation has been an influential aspect to the leadership there in shaping that mission and vision. So I'd like to welcome you, Pastor Singleton, to the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So why don't we just start? I've read your bio. If you want to maybe just tell us a little bit more about American Baptist churches and what mission support entails.
Well, I've been blessed to be on staff for 29 years. When I graduated from Union Seminary in 1994, I came over and served. And so part of it is funding the mission, which is global. We have missionaries in places overseas as well as throughout the country and in our various states and cities. Part of my role is to teach and preach on stewardship and mission to help develop committees that are geared toward accomplishing the mission work. We also organize mission groups. We've been in South Africa. We've been in Mississippi. We brought groups to Rochester, Mississippi. And so where there are people that are in need, we bring resources to help support persons in those various areas. And then we also equip our local churches to achieve their own purpose, their own sense of mission and vision. So we do trainings, trustees, trainings with deacons. We do Christian education trainings. We do have our spring rallies, our annual meetings, which are opportunities for faith and fellowship. We have 185 churches throughout New York City, as well as in Long Island and in Southern Westchester.
Mm-hmm. And that's such a broad portfolio and important work, as you are, the senior pastor of a church in Montclair, New Jersey, but also serving in a role outside of that, helping to influence and shape the ability of a coalition or a region of churches as they're serving in the greater metropolitan New York area. So as you think of yourself in those two roles, right, and many ways in which you have seen and experienced churches serving and engaging in their communities, why do you believe that community service is so important?
Well, community service is the church visible. If all we do is huddle on Sunday morning in virtual and or physical space and break out of the huddle on Monday morning, only to return to remain in our homes, then we are no earthly good and our living is in vain. Community service says that we are here. We are aware of what's happening in the world. We are in the trenches with vulnerable people to bring relief and resources and our prayerful presence. And when we engage in community service, We are Christ in flesh and in blood, feeding, clothing, housing, registering people to vote, organizing efforts to stop gun violence, caring for seniors, opening our doors for the community to gather for a variety of activities, tutoring children and youth, and advocating. This is the church being salt and light, and we are called to serve, which checks the patterns to consume, to keep, to lock, secure, to look out for ourselves. And we remember the words of Jesus, who says, the greatest among us are those that are serving. And so we demonstrate our greatness, and we are at our best when we are serving the community.
Yes, indeed. And service to the community is what connects us to the community, right? Outside of the walls of the church. And there are more people outside of the church than there are inside of the church.
Amen.
And, you know, historically, and you've touched upon this as you were giving your intro there, churches have been involved in communities and all kinds of issues in times of crisis, after major storms, for social justice issues. So maybe you can just share some about the role churches and their members should have in being advocates for social justice and meeting the basic needs of the community.
Well, let me be a preacher here and put your question in context. First, talk a little bit about the context that we find ourselves in, and then deal with your question directly. We are living in dangerous times where the church cannot afford to be silent or complicit in what is happening. We are seeing a call for all states to succeed along lines of blue and white. Blue and red. We're also seeing a proliferation of guns and more gun violence. And we have seen an insurrection at the nation's capital trying to stop a peaceful transfer of power. And we've recently seen the Speaker of the House turn over 40,000 hours of surveillance video footage of that insurrection to Fox 5 News without permission, placing our security in jeopardy. We are seeing laws being passed to make it difficult to vote. We are seeing what feels like a push back to the Civil War. We are seeing cultural wars around issues of racial theory education and reproductive rights and rising anti-Semitism. And all this is happening to conflate the injustices that are already been happening. We are seeing police brutality and murder of Black men. And the American system of justice is people getting what they deserve. United States currently incarcerates 2.2 million people. Nearly half are nonviolent drug offenders. And while the United States has only 5% of the world's population, it has nearly 25% of the prisoners. And the face of crime in America is people of color. 32% of the U.S. population is represented by African Americans and Hispanics, compared to 56% of the United States incarceration populated being represented by African Americans and Hispanics. There is definitely a disproportionate role. And so now to speak directly to your question, the role that the church has is a biblical vision. It's to work toward an egalitarian society that is based on principles of equality and solidarity. We are working toward people receiving their fair share of goods available. We are working towards people having the ability to maximize their full potential to achieve their purpose. We are working towards injustice being addressed. And so we can't deal with everything. We got to discern what is our calling, and then work in the area where we have been called, whether it's housing justice or women's reproductive rights, voting rights, or dealing with racism or the prison industrial complex. There are so many areas of injustice for us to address. The church needs to pray and discern and be in agreement that this is our calling. And then we need to practice what we preach. How dare we preach about justice if there are injustices in our own house? We've got to practice healthy relationships and learn what it means to love unconditionally, respect one another, practice mercy and compassion and fairness and kindness and forgiveness. And the last thing I'll say about this is that we need to practice a version and expression of justice that's in keeping with the word of the Lord. And that is to say, this punitive form of justice that we are experiencing is not what we at the church are about. This system is not concerned about rehabilitation or transformation. It's about depopulating neighborhoods, particularly of Black and brown people. And we're seeing a new form of the prison industrial complex. I'm more interested in restorative justice, getting into the heart of people, getting into what are the conditions and circumstances that led to criminal behavior and lifestyle, getting to confession and repentance and accountability and healing. Not only for the individual harmed and for the perpetrator, but for the communities that have been affected by the crime, holding people responsible, apologizing sincerely, and reconciling. That's what restorative justice is about. That's more in keeping with the biblical vision, not just locking them up and making them worse, but helping them to become better so that they're not repeat offenders of the same deed. And that's what we're about in Lent, coming out of the journey of 40 days, better. Not doing what we've always done, but changed and transformed.
And I feel like your answers are like sermonettes here. Like the preacher in you is just coming out with each response. And so I would love to hear more as you're talking about restorative justice and the healing process and, not being overly punitive, but really trying to heal and restore communities. How important is it, or how important do you believe it is that we partner with people of different faiths, or perhaps even people who do not ascribe to any particular form of spiritual justice?
Well, let me give you an example, and I will share names also in the context in which we are doing ministry. A brother and friend of mine, James Harris, and I went to Temple Shomron Amuna in Montclair, and we were visiting rabbis there. And he said, and I quote, "I have lived in Montclair since 1972, and this is the first time that I set foot in this space." And it was 2021, which meant it had been 39 years since he had been there. And Montclair is one of the most diverse collaboratives in the country. And I ask you, what good is diversity if it's not embraced, engaged, celebrated, or if it's just tolerated? The state of affairs in many communities is that we live comfortably in ethnic and religious enclaves, particularly in New York City, where you have Puerto Rican folk on one side and Dominican people on one side, and then you have not just Euros, but Russian communities. And so we're comfortable living apart and not together. And I remember the quote that still rings true, Dr. King: "Sunday morning is the most segregated day in America." And new research shows that most Americans are still okay with separation. Not only are we still segregated, but now there are more and more hate crimes and violent acts to widen the gap. We are hearing chants and protests: "Jews will not replace us. Go back to your country. Go back to Africa. This is not the place for you. You don't belong here. All are not welcome." We are daily receiving exclusionary messages. Need for justice if we knew each other beyond our differences. And so partnering with diverse persons and groups helps build bridges and tear down walls and cultivates a more integrated and whole community. It's hard to shoot someone you love. It's hard to beat someone that you respect and you appreciate. It's hard to destroy a community if that's the community that nurtured you, that helped you grow and evolve into the person you become. We need to counter the culture with fresh messages of inclusivity. Like, we can do more together than apart. United we stand, and divided we fall. We are in this together. We cannot fight the good fight of faith alone. We need each other to survive and thrive. I got you. You got me. And we got each other. To have community, we must be humane. We must show respect. We must demonstrate compassion and kindness and mercy. And remember that love is stronger than hatred, and light is greater than darkness. Peace is greater than chaos. Joy is greater than sorrow. Hope is greater than despair. And from the Christian perspective, resurrection is stronger than death. There is hope when we are able to come together and bring our best selves to the enterprise of building community.
One of the things that I heard you say in there, and it picks up on the building community piece, because our communities are diverse. And that's the reason that we often celebrate our communities, right? And there is a greater consciousness now around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you hear that phrase in so many corporate spaces and the halls of, university and so forth, and churches that are, striving to be more diverse because of the fact that you just mentioned around Sunday morning being the greatest segregated hour of the week. But when I think about that, and I hear you talk about that, I hear you saying that the church can be and has been an agent for change. And so as an agent for change, if the church is serving in that way, that can create some friction, right? With the things or the objects that are the object of change or the object of the attention. How do you deal with the fallout of that? And is there a personal example that you could share?
Yes. I would say this is Black History Month, so I need to get this in because February 28th is coming.
Okay, go ahead.
But I am inspired by the courage and fearlessness that our forebears demonstrated as they worked in and through the church in the face of death threats and bombings and lynchings and gun violence and dogs and hoes and incarceration and all of the weapons that terrorism used to try to stop them. They continued, and so we are benefiting from their fearlessness and courage and strength in the face of all that would try to stop them. And so our church, Union Baptist Church, is located on Midland Avenue. I'm going to share a story with you about fallout from change. And so where we do ministry on Midland, it is a favorite site for many runs, 5Ks, 10Ks. And so, sometimes when we come to church, we see barriers all over the township. It makes it difficult for us to get there. In one particular church, I just arrived, and there must have been about 1 or 2 people in the sanctuary when I got there. And the 11 o'clock hour came and went, and as it went on, people could not get there. They had returned back to their home. So I went to the organizer of the run, and I said, "Look, I run. Let's see if we can do something together. I share your passion. Can we try to do this on a different day or at a different time? Worship is important to us, and our worship was blocked." Yes, I was told that we'll work this together. The next year, I see signs and placards throughout the township. The same group is doing the same run in the same place. And so I had about a week to try to do something about it. I went to the police department and they told me, don't you know this particular group runs this town and there's nothing that you can do about it. So I went into church. We coordinated a protest. We went out on Sunday morning with the bullhorn and we worshiped out in the street and we disrupted their event. And while they were speaking on their platform, that they came running over, "Shut this down, shut this down," they said. And I said, "You are interrupting our worship." She said, "Sabbath is on Saturday and not on Sunday." And so then I knew we had a problem with respecting our religious practices and an understanding of how Muslims gather on Friday, Jewish sisters and brothers gather on Saturdays, and Christians gathered on Sunday. And so that began the Interfaith Ecumenical Series of Sacred Studies, in which I have been working to bring together Jewish, Christian, and Muslim persons to better understand each other. And I want to let you know we are in our 9th year. Okay. So we used the negative and turned it into a positive. And the theme for this year is moving toward community. in which we are seeking to better understand each other as we talk about our faith, practices, and rituals, so that such a thing will not happen again.
That is a beautiful example. And I had not heard that story before. I thought I knew pieces of it, but I did not know that is how the Interfaith Ecumenical Series began. So just maybe one follow-up question to that is, what sort of leadership style or methods did you think that you were employing in that situation to deal with that conflict? Or if you want to talk broader than that, that's all right too.
Well, it was definitely a collaborative leadership style.
Yeah.
Because even after that event, I went back and talked with the leadership of that. They understood it and they stopped doing it. And I invited the leader, who was also Jewish, and they had a great cause. In fact, we were written up in the Montclair Times. Rarely do you see two charitable institutions who are working for the good be in conflict with each other. That's what the title was. And so they ceased from having that, and I invited them to come to our church to be a part of it. I attended Hartford Seminary, where I got my doctorate, and that's an institution that's very strong on what they call Abrahamic partnership. And I had one of my professors come and do some of the teaching there. So that was a collaborative leadership style, and also reflects my the way I deal with conflict. I go directly to it. I try to find the source of it, and then I use conversation as a primary methodology for us to get to it. When I was doing my dissertation, I did it at a church in Brooklyn, and the thesis for my dissertation is conversation is transformational human activity that helps us to facilitate healing and discernment at the same time. And so I used that at this church that was heavily embroiled in conflict. And we developed different forms of conversation given the level area of conflict that we were in. And my thesis was successful when I got them to stop talking about the people that they were angry with and start talking about mission and ministry and define what they were doing. So we were able to get past that. Now, I'm not naive to think that just getting people in a room together and talking is what's going to bring about the transformation and the healing, but there needs to be some reciprocating patterns, which I was articulating in my dissertation. Some folk need to acknowledge and confess mistakes on both sides. How did we contribute to this conflict? There needs to be an ability to listen, not waiting to get mine in. And while I remain grounded in my position in an effort to meet people where they are, to come out of your comfort zone, there needs to be a willingness to say, I can learn from you, even as I teach you something new, which we saw in that example that I gave you. And then there needs to be some recognition of what's the good that's happening here, and some honest sharing, and not just saying what you want to say, however you want to say it, but learning how to communicate and take some risk, but learning how to communicate in a way where it could land without being so offensive. And if you notice in Matthew 18, which is what the church, particularly Baptist churches, use as a model for dealing with conflict, in Matthew 18, Jesus outlines, it's also part of our covenant that we read when we gather for communion. First, Jesus says, go one-on-one to the person. If that doesn't work, go and bring another person. And if that doesn't bring about peaceable results, then take it to the congregation. And then ultimately we see a transition beyond the congregation. So if you look at what Jesus is saying, conversation is intricate in each of those steps.
Yes.
And so recognize that sometimes people are not in an emotional space where they can talk about what's happening.
Sure.
And I've experienced that. And so, part of it, my leadership style is to say nothing, to be silent, to engage in prayer, to give people space and place to be where they are. And when they are ready, we can come to have that conversation. Now, one of my challenges is that because people in their own homes, in their own backgrounds, have not seen effective conversation, they come with the negative perspective that this conversation can't be fruitful and productive because they haven't seen it before. Sure. So that's why there needs to be some kind of skillful movement, artful movement through the conversation so that people are not on defensive and trying to dismiss, deny, and defend, but are being open and feel like they're in a safe place where they can talk. And there are many different approaches to dealing with conflict management, conflict resolution. I seek to work towards conflict transformation, which is when you try to preserve the relationship. And, you function as a mediator. You try to get to the deep rooted cause of the conflict and work towards an enduring change, not a cosmetic change, but one that's going to last. And where the relationships are made stronger because of the conflict, which is what happened in the example that I gave you with the 10K run. And so, you just kind of help people do that soul searching, and then also getting to what are some systemic changes that need to happen. So conflict can actually be a gift to help us to get to understand each other and to understand ourselves, understand each other, and work towards a new kind of context in which we can enjoy each other's presence and not tolerate it.
Well, you gave us a lot of meat there in that response. But one thing that I think is landing with me is conflict as a gift, because I don't often think of it that way. But as you framed it in terms of, can it facilitate healing? Can it facilitate greater understanding? Can it facilitate closer relationships? Then it clearly is a gift, because maybe but for the conflict, you wouldn't have the healing, or but for the conflict, you wouldn't have the stronger relationships. And so I think that is a really healthy and empowering way to think of conflict, especially when so many people don't have a healthy framework for it, or might have behaviors that are counterproductive, whether it's avoidance and backbiting and all those other sorts of things. The healing that can come out of these discussions, but sometimes we need to heal to even have the discussion, right? Because there's so much baggage that individuals may carry with them. So just thank you for that insight.
Let me just add one other thing to this. Sure. There's a resource that I use. There are many good books on dealing with this, but one in particular that I leaned on was Mark Gopin's book, Healing the Heart of Conflict, 8 Crucial Steps to Making Peace with Yourself and Others. So that's a good read.
Okay. Thank you for that source. So in the few minutes that we have left, I'm going to transition and wrap up. I call this segment Leader to Leader. And so I'm going to ask you to leave us with one question that would challenge today's leaders. And then I'm going to ask you to answer a question that was posed by a different guest that we had on the show, and that you'll be able to share your reflections on that. So why don't we start with your question to today's leaders?
What legacy are you leaving behind? One of the big problems in our churches and other institutions is we're not doing succession planning. We're not preparing leaders for the future. And so what examples have you left people to help them to build upon what you have achieved and make the community institution better?
So say it one more time. What legacy are you leaving behind?
Yes. What legacy are you leaving behind? What examples are you leaving? We're always leaving something behind, whether intentional or unintentional. So what is that? Can you name what it is that you're leaving so that the institution is not starting from scratch or trying to overcome what you have done that to its own demise? But what are you leaving behind that has made this community better as a result of you coming to where you've been?
All right. Excellent. And I can't wait to hear that question answered by one of our future speakers. And I will be sure to let you know when that happens so you can tune back in to listen. And so now for our final question, and this was posed by our very first guest on the show, Tanya Blocker, who is a director and senior counsel at National Grid, which is located in New York. And the question that she posed was, what is your why? So what motivates you to do what you do?
My why is born out of my relationship with Jesus Christ and my identity as a child of God and as a Black man. So my why is spiritual, it's cultural, it's financial, it's physical, it's emotional, it's mental. It includes my identity, my calling, my purpose, and all of this precedes my doing. Sometimes we do and we don't have a sense of our why. I do what I do because I am fulfilling my purpose on earth. And what motivates me most is pleasing God. Why am I here? I'm here to express love and to live in loving relationships with family, friends, and the wider community. I am here to lead people into a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I am here to facilitate the distribution of resources from those who have to those who have not. I am here to be an agent of interpersonal and intrapersonal transformation and bring out the best in people. I am here to mentor people and share from the fullness of my life. I'm here to create institutions and nurture ideas that build bridges and bring diverse people into changing relationship one with another. I am here to advance the struggle of Black people towards liberation, healing, and wholeness. I'm here to inspire people to do what they think they cannot do and to exemplify what doing the impossible looks like. I'm here to speak the power and lead people in institutions in a better way than when I came. I am here to love, to laugh, to play, to run, and to enjoy my life. And I'll share one quick story with you. I was running the marathon in November, the New York City Marathon. I was coming up a mile 20, going from the Bronx into Manhattan, and this woman was standing up with a placard, "Remember your why." And I was aggravated. I said, "She's so heady. I'm exhausted. Remember my why. I got to think about this." And then I remembered my why. Why was I running the marathon? I was learning to trust the Lord. I wasn't using conventional methodologies and process for training. I was completely trusting God. And when I remembered that, it made me stronger to finish that race. And when I got into Central Park and hit that finish line, my why is what carried me. My why was rooted in this calling that God had to run the marathon to bring me closer in that rarefied atmosphere of being among the small 1% of the world that ever runs this. I got there because I trusted God. That was my why. And your why will carry you to your finish line as well.
Well, what a powerful, powerful testimony, and really well articulated response around what is your why. So I want to thank you, Pastor Singleton, for joining us today and for sharing and for your transparency, because it takes a lot of leadership courage and self-awareness to share at the depths that you've shared today, and to really provide us with a lens into who you are as a man, who you are as a leader, as a pastor, and how you are framing your life, right, around this very robust definition of why. So again, thank you for coming on. I hope that you'll join us again. And for those who are watching, please look up Pastor Singleton at Union Baptist Church in Montclair. Pastor, do you have the website, or should folks just Google? What's the website for the church?
UBC Montclair.
UBC Montclair.
Montclair.
So
yeah, you look it up and it comes into Jersey.
Yes, UBC Montclair in New Jersey. So you can follow him along, join their services, and also get the information on the Interfaith Ecumenical Series that he was talking about earlier in the session.
And you can email us at ubcmontclairnj@gmail.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And that concludes us for today. This has been another episode of The Faith Edge.